No one else from any of the other houses went dark? Really? No one else? Just all the wizards that went dark were all from Slytherin. Is someone checking the water that they're drinking? Someone needs to check on these kids. Hello book munchers! Today we are going to be reviewing the first book in the Harry Potter series. It is the last week of January, which means that the first month of the Harry Potter read-along is now over, which means that it is time for our review. And for this review, we are going to be using my brand new book review points system that I created, all so that I could evaluate the books that I'm reading on the same scale. So that way we can rank all of the books that I'll be reviewing. So without further ado, let's get into the book review. So in the first part of our review, we are going to be reviewing the book cover, specifically of the cover of the ebook, which is how I bought the first book in the Harry Potter series. I know there are other versions, but for this review we are going to be reviewing this specific book cover, and I'll put it up on screen. So for each section in our book review, we have some parameters and the points that those specifications are worth. And so if a book has those specifications, they get points, and if not, those points get taken away. I can also not give any points or give partial points depending on how I feel the book earned those points. So the first parameter in evaluating the book cover is whether or not it's professional, and in my opinion it is professional. So that is plus 10 points. Next, is this cover appropriate for the genre? And I definitely think it is, so that is plus 2 points. The next question is, does the color scheme match the feel of the book? Once again, plus 2 points. This book definitely has a book cover that matches the feel of the book, and it even has some of the elements of the storyline on the cover. We see the owl and we see lightning. And finally, does this book cover make me want to pick it up and read the blurb? And it definitely did, so that is plus 10 points. I definitely love the red gold vibe that's going on in this book cover. So in total, our book cover here passed all of the parameters of the book cover evaluation, gaining it 24 points. Next up, we evaluate the blurb. For those of you who haven't read the blurb of the first book in the Harry Potter series before, I will be reading that out to you right now. So I've got my phone right here, and the blurb goes as follows. Turning the envelope over, his hand trembling, Harry saw a purple wax seal bearing a coat of arms, a lion, an eagle, a badger, and a snake surrounding a large letter H. Harry Potter has never even heard of Hogwarts when the letters start dropping on the doormat of number 4 Privet Drive. Addressed in green ink on yellowish parchment with a purple seal, they are swiftly confiscated by his grisly aunt and uncle. Then, on Harry's 11th birthday, a great beetle-eyed giant of a man named Rebus Hagrid bursts in with some astonishing news. Harry Potter is a wizard, and he has a place at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. An incredible adventure is about to begin. So that was a blurb, and the first parameter on our evaluation is, does it make me want to buy the book? This is probably the most important thing about a blurb, and honestly, I'm gonna give it a meh on this one. Instead of the full 10 points, I'm gonna give it 5 points, half points, just because I feel like this blurb does not inspire curiosity about the conflict that takes place in the book. It only tells us that Harry Potter's a wizard and he's going to a school for wizards, but it doesn't really talk about the conflict of the story, which is what inspires curiosity. So for me, half points. The next point is front matter and extras, and this is anything that is extra in the book. So for example, books that have maps, or specifically in the first book of the Harry Potter series, at least in the ebook, at the beginning of every chapter there's a little drawing that has something to do with what's going to happen in the chapter, and so because of those extras, 2 points are awarded. And the next point. Another 2 points are going to be awarded for the book having chapter titles. I personally think it's very important for a book to have chapter titles instead of just chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, because when you're going back to the book, you know specifically in what chapters specific events occurred. So a total of 4 points for the first book of Harry Potter here. And the next thing that we are going to be evaluating is the plot. And this is where I'm going to be talking about a lot of plot holes in a couple of questions, and I'm going to be taking out a lot of points for the plot holes, but don't worry, later on we're going to be evaluating other things such as description and setting, as well as overall the beginning, middle, and end. So with that said, let's get into the plot. Our first question is whether it's predictable or whether it's surprising. For me personally, this book was very surprising. There's a huge plot twist at the end, so this gets a full 40 points from me. Our second question is whether or not the plot is strong enough to carry the whole book, and I definitely think that it is, so that is another 20 points. Now, our next question is whether or not the plot makes sense, whether or not there are any plot holes, and we are going to be subtracting 10 points for every time the plot is too convenient, that has a plot hole, or doesn't really make sense. The first time the plot doesn't make any sense for me personally is right from the bat. We see that Dumbledore has decided to leave Harry with his aunt and uncle, who are muggles. They are not wizards, and it really doesn't make any sense to me why Dumbledore would leave Harry with his aunt and uncle. I do understand that they are his only living family, but you're telling me that Dumbledore leaves Harry with this family and never checks up on him to see whether or not they are abusing him, which they are, and you're telling me that Dumbledore does not know this? I call BS, because when the letters start to arrive, they are clearly addressed to Harry Potter's cupboard, so someone somewhere is obviously aware that Harry Potter is being made to sleep in this cupboard and probably knows about what has been going on in the Dursleys' house, and yet nothing is being done to prevent this. Nothing is done to take Harry Potter out of this toxic environment. He's just kind of left at the Dursleys' mercy. And honestly, the most logical thing to do would have been to have Harry Potter be raised in the wizarding world, or even just like on campus or in a host family somewhere to protect him and also to teach him. For me, this is convenient plot because it creates a convenient situation for Harry Potter to grow up outside of the wizarding world and to grow up humble and not used to having a lot of things. So I'm subtracting 10 points here for Dumbledore not checking up on the child he just kind of abandoned. I'm taking off another 10 points because after Hagrid comes to find Harry Potter and he realizes the situation that Harry Potter has been living in and that the Dursleys haven't told him anything about the wizarding world and they've been abusing him basically his entire life. They go to get his school things and then he gets sent back to the Dursleys' house until it's time for him to go to Hogwarts. Why is he being sent back to this house instead of being sent to Hogwarts, even if it's what, like a month or two earlier? And then at the end of the year, and this goes into the second book and I'll talk about this again when I do that review, he is sent back to the Dursleys again. I mean, does Hogwarts not have a system to take care of this issue? Considering human history and the fact that there are lots of other kids that go to Hogwarts that come from completely muggle families, I'm 100% sure that this is also happening to other kids, and you're telling me that Hogwarts doesn't have a system in place to protect these kids from toxic families? I call BS, because they could just allow the students to stay on campus or give them host families. There are so many simple solutions to this problem, so in my opinion, plot is being convenient. I'm subtracting 10 points. The second time the plot kind of doesn't make any sense is when we get to Hogwarts and we find out that Hogwarts is separated into 4 houses, and it makes for a great storyline, except for the fact that I have to wonder why the school is separated into 4 groups. It seems like this system would just create more animosity between students, and wouldn't they want to promote teamwork between different types of wizards? At the very least, if you're gonna have the groups, why would they be completely isolated from each other instead of having way more interaction between the houses? Also, I have to ask myself in this situation, why, if all of the wizards that went bad are from Slytherin, why is Slytherin still a house at Hogwarts? Like, why hasn't it been disbanded? It seems like from the description of the other characters, Slytherin is kind of a cult, and I don't understand why it would be allowed to just kind of fester or be left alone. I feel like they would have done something about it, right? I don't know. That's just me, but I'm taking off 10 points. Also, I'm taking off another 10 points because I don't believe that no one else from any of the other houses went dark. Really? No one else. Just all the wizards that went dark were all from Slytherin. Is someone checking the water that they're drinking? Or maybe the Slytherin quarters are like painted with that old paint that has like asbestos or lead or something. Someone needs to check on these kids, because to me it seems impossible that everyone who would go evil would be from one specific house. No one from Ravenclaw, no one from Hufflepuff, no one from Gryffindor joined Voldemort on his evil quest to take over the world. I don't know, I call BS. And I'm taking 10 points. I'm gonna leave Snape for the later section where we talk about the characters, but you best believe I'm taking off some points for Snape's character, okay? Next, I'm taking off points for the Hermione lying about the troll situation. I don't know why she had to lie in this situation. In my opinion, the truth seemed pretty acceptable. I don't know why McGonagall would punish them for this. She could just be like, hey, I lost track of time, I was in the bathroom, and Harry and Ron realized that I wasn't there when everyone was kind of being sent to the rooms, and they came to look for me and make sure I was okay. I don't see why that would get them in trouble, especially when the lie that she made was that she went off to go find this troll and get herself into trouble. So I don't know why she's lying to get herself into more trouble, except for that the plot needs her to be cool in this moment for Harry and Ron to realize that, hey, maybe she's not such a rule follower after all. So I don't know, I feel like the truth would have been acceptable, and there's no reason for her to lie in this situation. Plot is being convenient, I see you, and I'm taking 10 points. Next, why is Snape being allowed to ref the match between Gryffindor and Hufflepuff? Like, I know his team isn't either one of those, but his team is going to be the one who's playing the victor, so he is not impartial, and you're telling me that no one else can ref this match? No one else. School full of professors, no one else can ref this match but Snape. Really? I'm taking 10 points. Also, later, when Hermione and Ron go and tell Hagrid that Snape apparently tried to assassinate Harry, why is Hagrid not reporting this? Also, later on, when they tell him that they think that Snape is trying to steal from Dumbledore, why does Hagrid not report this? This feels like something you would report whether or not you have the proof, just considering how important the Sorcerer's Stone is. So I'm taking 10 points off. I feel like Hagrid would have totally been debriefed or something, or given some sort of information, because he's a part of this group that is protecting the Sorcerer's Stone. I feel like he would have had information from Dumbledore saying, hey, if you see any of these red flags, come let me know. But apparently not. So 10 points off, whether it's for Hagrid not wanting to report stuff or for poor planning, I don't know. But either way, plot is convenient. Next up, Harry has a whole conversation with Dumbledore when they're talking about the Mirror of Erised. I think that's how it's pronounced. This whole time, Harry and his friends believe that Snape is trying to steal from Dumbledore, and Dumbledore is in front of him. They have this whole conversation, and Harry doesn't think once to bring up the fact that he thinks that another professor is trying to steal from the headmaster. This seems like important information, but of course the plot needs us to go on to the finale where Harry and Ron and Hermione take care of the threat instead of Dumbledore. So plot is being convenient, and I'm taking 10 points off. Next up, we have the climax of the book where Harry, Ron, and Hermione go on to protect the Sorcerer's Stone. The Sorcerer's Stone is about to be stolen. It is the perfect moment because apparently Dumbledore has received a notice from the Ministry of Magic that needs him urgently, and he has to leave the school on his broom and go fly to the Ministry of Magic, and so that's why he's not there, and that's why Harry, Ron, and Hermione have to go take care of this mess by themselves. And this is a bit of an issue with the world building I have. I cannot explain to myself how this magical world of wizardry doesn't have a faster way to send messages. Like, at the same time this is happening in the Muggle world, we have phone calls and might even, I'm not sure exactly when this is or what technology we used to have back in the 1990s, but I'm pretty sure pagers existed or some sort of way to send messages super fast, and you're telling me that there's no magical equivalent in the wizarding world? And you're also telling me that there's no other way for Dumbledore to get to the Ministry of Magic faster than flying there? Or that there's no system in place for him to get called back to the school immediately if there's an emergency at the school? I call BS. This whole system doesn't make any sense to me, other than the fact that Dumbledore couldn't be at the school, because if he was at the school, then our protagonist wouldn't need to go and face the big bad. So this is a huge plot hole, and I'm taking 10 points. Also, and I'm not taking points off because it's the author's choice, but I have a bit of a commentary on the lack of technology in the wizard world. Like, muggles are treated as kind of like these primitive creatures, but as we've seen, the muggles have technology that is obviously much more useful, at least in the messaging system. The muggle technology seems to be more effective than sending letters by owl. To me, I feel like the absence of muggle technology is convenient to the plot. But I'm not taking points off because this is the choice of the author, so I kind of get it. Next up, and we've got two more things left, and then we move on to the next section, but this one is a biggie. After the final battle, it's heavily implied that Dumbledore definitely knew that Harry, Ron, and Hermione were going to go up against the big bad, and I definitely question this decision. Dumbledore is a master at his craft, hopefully, and he has a school full of professionals in magic, and are they gonna handle it? No. We're gonna let an 11-year-old boy and his two best friends go up against the biggest bad to ever bad. I definitely question this decision, and I'm taking off 10 points for child endangerment. And the final 10 points that I will be subtracting is for the ending. I know we're supposed to be on Gryffindor's side, and so basically what happened is there's this house cup, and Slytherin is about to be handed the house cup because when Harry and Hermione were caught after the dragon incident, they had a bunch of points taken away, and so Gryffindor fell into last place in the competition for the house cup, and so Slytherin, the enemy for some reason, I mean, I know the reason, but again, animosity between students is weird. Anyway, Slytherin is about to win this cup, and at the very last moment, Dumbledore awards enough points to Gryffindor because Harry, Ron, and Hermione were the ones who took down the big baddie. They are awarded enough points for Gryffindor to surpass Slytherin in the competition for the house cup, and they win the house cup. In my opinion, I feel like this was a definitely mean move on Dumbledore's part. I mean, he could have done this like way before the party. Slytherin has organized this whole feast. They've decorated everything in their colors. They're about to be handed the cup, and then Dumbledore decides to award last minute points. This could have been done way beforehand, and it would have been way less of a blow to Slytherin, and I don't know if realistically a headmaster would alienate a whole group of students this way. I mean, it's kind of like if your boss threw you a party for getting a promotion, and then at the party for you getting your promotion, he gives the promotion to somebody else. That don't make no sense to me, and I'm taking 10 points off for it. Also, if Slytherin had won the House Cup, but Harry, Ron, and Hermione still won against the bad guy. I feel like that bittersweet ending would have been more realistic. In total, I have subtracted 110 points for plot holes, plot being convenient when it feels like it, and the plot making no sense when it doesn't want to make any sense. But don't worry, we will keep adding and subtracting points as we keep evaluating the book. Next up, next parameter in the plot is whether the plot is engaging or entertaining, and I definitely felt that it was, so I'm awarding a full 30 points here. The next parameter is whether or not there is too much exposition or backstory, and there isn't, so I'm awarding 10 points. The next question is if the pace of the book is too fast or too slow or just right, and for me the pace really fit the book and the genre, so I'm awarding 10 points for pace. Next up is theme, and the first question is whether or not there is a very clear theme of the book, and I'm going to award half points here just because there are certainly themes in the book, but none of them is focused on enough, in my opinion, to be the overarching theme of the book. There are themes such as loss of family, specifically when Harry encounters the Mirror of Erised, where he sees his family. That's his deepest desire. There's also friendship is a big theme. Overcoming bullying is a theme. Gaining self-confidence is a theme. But in my opinion, I feel like none of those were strong enough for it to be like one clear theme that this is definitely the main theme of the book. So because it wasn't clear to me which theme was the main theme, I'm awarding half points. So instead of the full 10 points, I'm giving it 5. The next point is whether the themes in the book make sense, and to me they definitely make sense, and they fit with the story and they fit with the character development, so I'm awarding a full 10 points. Is the theme presented in a way that is complex or simple enough according to the target market? And here we are talking about a middle grade target market. The themes would need to be simplified for that target market, and I think the themes are definitely presented in a way where a middle grade reader would definitely be able to understand all of the themes that are present in the story. So I'm awarding a full 10 points here. And just a quick note before we continue, if you have any different opinions of the book, feel free to leave a comment down below telling me what you think, and if you have any suggestions for parameters that I could add to the book review point system, leave them down below. Alright, the next thing we'll be evaluating is the conflict of the story. Is the opposing force just as strong or stronger than the protagonist? And this is what really makes the conflict in a story feel realistic and cause realistic tension. And for me, definitely Voldemort is at the point of the first book much stronger and much more of a big bad than Harry is a skilled wizard. In this book, Voldemort is really beaten out of luck, but there's definitely this kind of air, this tense air, even after he's been beaten, because they know that he's going to come back, and Harry Potter might not be able to rely on luck the next time. So the tension here is great. The antagonist is definitely stronger than the protagonist, or just as strong as, so I'm awarding a full 50 points here. The next point is, does the antagonist have a motivation other than being evil? So a Bond villain. Evil for evil's sake. And I have to say that, in my opinion, the antagonists of this book, both of them, are not shown to have clear motivations other than to be evil. We don't really know what the motivations are, and I get that they will be revealed in further books, but at least in this one, the antagonist seems to be the antagonist just because he wants to cause chaos and be evil. So I'm taking off 40 points for the antagonist not having a clear motivation. The next point point is, does the conflict have a purpose in the story? And it definitely does, so I'm awarding 40 points. The next parameter is whether or not conflict in this book advanced character development, and it definitely does, so I'm awarding 30 points, the full 30 points. Next up is description. I felt there was a perfect amount of description in this book, just enough for me to imagine the setting, but not so much that it becomes distracting. So I'm awarding 10 points here. Our next question is whether or not the description is immersive, and it definitely is, so I'm awarding another 10 points. The next question is whether or not the description engages all 5 senses at least once in the book, and that's also a yes. The description does involve all 5 senses, and so I'm awarding 10 points here. Next up, we've got the setting of the book. Does the setting advance the plot? It definitely does, so I'm awarding 20 points. Is the setting easy to visualize? And it is, so I'm awarding another 20 points. Is the world building believable, seamless, and immersive? And for me, it totally was. I'm awarding 50 points. The author's world building skills are on another level, so definitely full points are deserved here. The next point is, if there's a magical system, does it make sense? And I'm actually gonna subtract points for this one. And this is because the magic system isn't really explained in the book. We don't know what the consequences of using too much magic or using the wrong types of magic. We don't really know if there is different types of magic in this magical system. What happens if someone uses the wrong type of magic or a bad type of magic and do evil things with it? What are the consequences? That's not really explained in this book, so I am taking off 40 points. I am also taking off 40 points for the next point, which is, if there's a political system, does it make sense? And it seems like there's a political system overall in the wizarding world. You know, you have the Ministry of Magic is mentioned, and we know that there's a banking system, but it's really not explained how the politics work, who's the leader of this world, whether they inherit the position or they're elected to their position, what do they do? And so because none of that is explained in this book, I'm taking off 40 points. The next thing we'll be evaluating is the opening of the book, which is the first page or first 2 pages of the book. And the question is, was I hooked after reading the opening? Was I curious? Did I want to keep reading? And honestly here, I'm gonna have to award half points. The story starts with the point of view of Mrs. Dursley, and basically she's talking about how ordinary she is and how normal they are, and nothing strange would ever happen to them, right? And so that kind of emphasis on the fact that they're so normal is the thing that causes a little bit of curiosity for you to continue reading. But I feel like the story would have started a lot stronger if it had started with Dumbledore meeting McGonagall and then meeting Hagrid and then deciding to leave Harry on the doorstep of the Dursleys, and then Mrs. Dursley going into her "I'm so normal" monologue. In my opinion, it takes a bit too long to get to any sort of action from the opening, so I'm awarding half points here, 25 points, because while I did want to keep reading, I wasn't as hooked as I could have been. Next up, we evaluate the chapters of the book, and here I am subtracting points. I subtract 50 points for every time I'm able to put the book down after a chapter, and 100 points if I'm able to put the book down in the middle of a chapter. And overall, I was able to put the book down twice, which is kind of awesome that it was only twice and not more. Once after the end of chapter 1 and once in the middle of chapter 5 right before they get to Diagon Alley. So I'm subtracting a total of 150 points. Next we move on to characters. Are the characters multidimensional and compelling? And here we are going to be evaluating Harry, Ron, Hermione, Hagrid, Draco, and Neville. So for Harry, Ron, and Hagrid, I feel like their characters are very multidimensional and very compelling, so 10 points for each of them. Hermione, however, I have to give only half points here just because for most of the book she's only presented as as this kind of stereotypical nerdy girl, and there isn't really that much more information given about her other than the fact that she's from a fully muggle family. There's no other insight into who she is as a person, so half points here. I'm going to be subtracting 10 points each for Draco and Neville, just because for Neville's character, I feel like he isn't presented in a way that gives us insight into who he is as a person. He kind of just shows up when the plot needs him to, and so I'm taking off 10 points. Draco is presented as this stereotypical bully character who's mean just for the sake of being mean, and while I do know that later on in the series more information is going to be presented about him and why he is the way that he is, in this book no other information about his character is presented that would make me feel like Draco is multidimensional or compelling, so I'm subtracting 10 points. Next up, do I care about what happens to the protagonist? I definitely do, so I'm adding 20 points. Next up, are the characters believable? Harry, Ron, and Hermione are definitely believable. It is definitely believable to me that someone like Harry and Ron and Hermione could exist. I'm only gonna give half points for Hagrid just because Hagrid is part of the staff at Hogwarts, and yet there seems to be no sort of protocol that he follows when he is given information from our trio about Snape potentially trying to kill Harry and trying to steal from Dumbledore. Also, I am taking 10 points off for Snape's character. I don't care who you are, this dude is obviously in his 30s or 40s and he's getting into it with like a 10-year-old. Like, he decides to attack Harry in the middle of his potions class, go at him for not knowing specific information, basically to embarrass him in front of the course, and we do not stand professors that do this, so 10 points off for Snape being super immature. Next up, are their motivations believable? And here I'm talking about Harry, Ron, Hermione, and I feel like for all of them, their motivations as they move through the storyline are all believable, so all of them get full points. And finally, are the characters in the book memorable overall? They definitely are, so a full 30 points here. Next up, we're talking dialogue. Does it advance the plot? Yes. We've got 30 points. Does the dialogue show the character's personality? Can we differentiate the characters when they speak? And you definitely can, especially in the case of Hagrid's character, so I'm awarding full points here. 30 points for Gryffindor. Or for Slytherin, because apparently they need as many points as they can get to avoid Dumbledore awarding his last-minute points. Next, is the dialogue believable? It definitely is. We're giving it 20 points here. And is there enough dialogue? And there definitely is, so 20 points. Next up is style. Does the writer have a unique and distinctive style? Yes, they do, especially in the first chapter that is told in a bit of a third-person narrative. I mean, the whole book is in third person, but from chapter 2 onwards, it's really focused on Harry's point of view, whereas the first chapter is third-person omniscient. And in the first chapter, the narrator seems to have its own personality, which I always love. Book gets 10 points here. Next up is whether the writer knows what they're doing, and this is referring to things like whether there are grammar errors or syntax errors, and here J.K. Rowling definitely knows what she's doing. She's definitely a great writer, so we're awarding 10 points. And lastly here, is the tone of the book appropriate for the story? And it is, so another 10 points. Now we are going to be evaluating the different parts of the book in terms of a 3-act structure, so beginning, middle, and end. And I've split the book up in equal sections based on chapters. So every section is 5 to 6 chapters. So, Act 1, the beginning. Does the story start at the right place? And we've already kind of talked about this. I feel like it would have been better to start with Dumbledore making the decision to leave Harry behind, or even starting the book right from Harry's point of view, and the whole exchange between Dumbledore, McGonagall, and Hagrid when they're leaving him at the doorstep of the Dursleys. That could have been revealed a little bit later. That would have been a choice. So I'm going to give half points here just because I feel like there were other options to start the book in a way where the action started a little bit right off the bat. So instead of 20 points, I'm only giving 10 points here. Is it immersive? I personally did not find the first 5 chapters immersive. It wasn't really until I reached the end of chapter 5 that I really just fell into the story and I wasn't able to put the book down again. I had to read the whole thing through. So for me, the beginning wasn't that immersive. It was only in the middle where things started to pick up. Did I want to continue reading after the first 5 chapters? Yes, I definitely did, so I'm awarding 50 points. Did I know who the protagonist was after the first 5 chapters? And yes, I did. Another 50 points. Was the inciting incident clear, surprising, and appropriate? Yes, it was. So that's 30 points. And we're moving on to the middle. So was I entertained through the middle, or was there a middle slump? I was definitely entertained through the middle of the book, and I feel like J.K. Rowling does an amazing job of this by introducing Quidditch as a sport and other school elements. I personally love stories that deal with sports. It's such an easy way to create tension in your story. So I'm gonna be awarding 50 points here. Next up, is there suspense, tension, and conflict? And yes, there is, so I'm awarding 40 points. We've got different types of conflict too. We've got Harry versus Draco, Harry versus Snape, and the potential of Snape versus Dumbledore. Next up, do I know who the antagonist is by the end of the middle? And yes, I definitely think that I do, so that's 50 points. Are the characters developing already? Yes, they are. We start to see the students kind of fall into a routine. We have them integrate more into the school society, and we see that they are growing in confidence in themselves, and so I'm going to be awarding 40 points here, a full 40 points. Next up, does it keep momentum? And it does, so another 30 points. Let's move on to the end of the book. Is the end satisfying, and does it provide closure? It does, so I'm awarding 20 points. Does it complete the story arc, and is the main conflict resolved? And yes, it is, so I am awarding 50 points. Does the end fulfill the book's promise? And it definitely does, so I'm awarding 20 points. Is the climax proportional to the rising action? Yes, it was, so 50 points. And was I hooked for the next book? And considering the fact that I already have the next book on my Kindle, I would say yes, another 40 points. Next up, we're talking about emotions. All of the feels that the book made me feel. The book almost made me cry in chapter 12, where Harry comes across the Mirror of Erist, and the theme basically of this chapter is Harry kind of missing the family that he never got to have. Oh my goodness, and so I am awarding 20 points here. I definitely smiled when Hermione was raising her hand in the air all the time because it definitely reminded of me, so I am awarding 20 points here. And I had to wince twice in the book, and it was when Harry gets caught by McGonagall each of the times that he does. The first one being when he is on his broomstick in the air when he's not supposed to be, and the second time when he gets caught with Hermione and they get so many points taken away from them by McGonagall, and he kind of gets ostracized by Gryffindor. So I'm adding 10 points for each of those, so that's 20 points in total. Next up, for the back matter, I am awarding 2 points just for the back matter existing, and I'm awarding another 50 points because after reading the excerpt of the next book, I definitely want to read the next book, so 50 points here. And thoughts. Am I interested in reading more from this author, not just within the Harry Potter series? And I definitely am, so I'm giving it 30 points. And lastly, but certainly not the least, did I have a good overall reading experience? And I absolutely did. I'm awarding 30 points for this. I can absolutely understand the Harry Potter hype right now. I absolutely want to go nuts and just fall into this fandom. I know it's one of the biggest fandoms of all, and so I'm super excited to go on and see fan art and read fan fiction and read maybe some books that are about the Harry Potter universe, and I'm just super excited for all of it, and I'm also super excited to continue reading the series and evaluating all of the books in the series. So the first book of Harry Potter gets a total of... I'm super excited to see how the next book in the series compares, as well as getting to read through the whole series. So that is all for today's video. It's a bit long, but we went into a lot of detail. Let me know if you like the book review point system, and if you have any suggestions, please leave them down below in the comments section. If you like the video, don't forget to leave a thumbs up, and if you are excited to see all of the book reviews and all of the book evaluations of the rest of the Harry Potter series, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. I am also going to be reviewing The Savior's Champion, which is a dark fantasy novel by Jenna Moresi, who is an author tuber here on YouTube. So if you're excited for all of that material coming up soon, subscribe to this channel and hit the little bell so you know when my next video is uploaded. Alright, that is all for today's video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!